The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I'm excited to have Nicole Porter Davis with me again. If you've been listening to the podcast, you may have heard our many conversations in the special series on trauma. And if you haven't, just a brief, quick little intro on Nicole. She has made her focus as an art therapist in the work of assisting communities and large groups of people in healing after tragic events that affect an entire population of people. And so she developed and founded the Emerald Sketch, which is a nonprofit agency designed to help mobilize clinicians anywhere in the world and set up sustainable creative arts therapy services immediately after a horrifying trauma. And there's tons and tons more about Nicole and all of the amazing things that she's accomplished. And if you want to hear those, re-listen to some of the old episodes where I give a more detailed introduction. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of relapse prevention in trauma work. And then we're going to kind of review and do a wrap up of each phase or stage that she kind of breaks down her approach and in really exciting and different way of doing things. She's also going to show some images of examples of the type of artwork that she does with clients around these specific phases. So if you're listening on audio, which a lot of you may be, that's awesome, but you won't be able to see the images. So if you want to see the images, you'll have to go over to our YouTube channel, which is the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast. If you can, please subscribe. Subscribing will help raise awareness and get attention to the episode and the podcast so other people can find these helpful resources, but you'll be able to see those images there. So welcome, Nicole. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Wonderful to be here. Yes. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. So let's dive in. How do you approach relapse prevention in trauma work?
Well, it feels really good to talk about relapse prevention, given that we've had closure culturally in changing of the guard. And, the Capitol now is housing Biden and Harris, and that feels fantastic. So I feel really happy to focus on relapse prevention with you. It's been a theme, if anyone has been listening, throughout the safety series on how it was hard for us to grapple with relapse prevention while we are still amidst the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And it feels like that is one sense of closure. And I feel good about that. So we're going to bring it in to our clinical work and how that relates directly with what we're doing with clients and families all over the nation and all over the world. And in the sequence, we start with safety, therapeutic relationship, secure remembrance, transformation, reframing, do social connection work, connecting people to their own social networks. Mm-hmm. So that is all established. We've done a lot of work with your client before you get to relapse prevention, hopefully. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to start with relapse prevention if you're working in inpatient units or foster situations where the children or patients are moving through the system at a higher capacity, right? Like we always may be willing to hint at relapse prevention.
Yeah.
And also be prepared to pull this sequence out if suddenly you find out someone's leaving in a week or there is going to be some abrupt change. You might have to pull this out when you're only at therapeutic relationship, right? But exactly that, packing the suitcase. That's how I like to think about it. Like we're always thinking the creative arts metaphor. And just like all the other sequences, I like to start with those creative arts mental fitness exercises, like a little bilateral work, and then provide a task, like pack a suitcase. Do you want to think directly about the creative arts tasks that have helped you the most and pick a symbol that matches that you would put in a suitcase? Or do you just want to dive into designing a suitcase and having fun packing it, and then we make the connections later, right? But just by giving that directive, we're encouraging the client to begin the work.
Yeah.
Where they are, if there's resistance, if there's acceptance, anywhere in between, that's there. It's already there. So you just want to plant the seed and invite them to pack the suitcase, right? Like literally. And then you dive into that metaphor.
So you're still giving choices, which has come up a lot. And every time you share about an example, you're always framing it in multiple choices. And I think that's really important in this work is people that feel that they don't have a sense of control, having choices fosters and builds a sense of control over what they're doing. So what kinds of things might you pack in the suitcase?
Yeah, it's a really great question, right? Like some of my favorites are the double-handed scribbling, right? The mandala practice. These are just some of my favorites that are coming to mind, right? Like I like these in my suitcase. The circle where you scribble for what you can control on the inside, and then when thoughts pop up that are out of control, you scribble on the outside of the circle and just let yourself really flow. So, we can name them for the client. I think this is an appropriate time where we can share, hey, I noticed that you really seemed to calm down a lot when you came in really hyper vigilant about your week. And then when you did this task where we draw across the page with both hands, watching the line, you really seemed to melt into your zone. And then you were ready to make art. Do you remember that? And then see where, and then that will usually associate to another one and another one. And other leading questions can be, which ones have you actually practiced at home across the last 3 to 9 months or however long we've been working together? Right? Like which ones are the ones that you utilize the most?
So what I really hear you saying is like you're framing the questions to help the client identify which tasks helped them to ground and center and self-regulate. And then once you're in a state of self-regulation, then we can make a choice of what we're going to pack. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think so. And depending on your client and their capabilities, again, this can all be metaphor, art as process, right? And you identify these things for them, right? Given the developmental age and their mental capacity, you want to be thinking about that. But a high functioning adult or child can absolutely relate and connect to the deep breathing that helps them or their favorite art tasks. And the nice thing about this is then this work of art becomes that tangible reminder for them, right? Like anyone who becomes accustomed to our creative arts therapy process knows their language, knows their image language at this point. They have strengthened what I consider the language organ, right? For themselves, where they have a dialogue about this. And then this becomes their visual reminder when they look at it, and the other cool thing about it, I find, is that someone can pull a work of art out years later. They have a file from their art therapy time, right? Or if we have the file and they want to revisit it with us, and they may not remember exactly what symbol represented what, but across the board, people remember the experience.
Sure.
Right? They remember how they felt with us when they made that art. Right? Yeah. They remember where it takes them.
Definitely. I've had clients come to me who've had art therapy in the past and bring their old artwork that they made years and years ago, the first time they were in art therapy. And they remember so much of what that experience was like for them. Which is always interesting to see when that happens, that they had such a positive experience with art therapy that they seek it out again.
Oh, and it's really beautiful blossoming opportunity too, to watch what people think of,
Mm-hmm.
what did feel best for them. And what you just said too is the biggest takeaway. Like sometimes it's hard for us, our work, when depending on the environment the therapist is working on, how it can be very short-lived, your time, or like they may establish a relationship and then that person gets shipped somewhere else. And it's hard for both the therapist and the client.
Yeah.
And a huge takeaway for us is that whatever that experience is, that last moment that we are together with that client, the energy that you're able to help them achieve is what's most important, right? Like that, those sensations that if they're difficult, but they know that they are in a space where it's safe to experience them,
Mm-hmm.
that's great, because then they're going to seek out another art therapist somewhere else. And that's what we want. Like we can't be everywhere for everyone all the time.
No.
We can't always be there for the same clients all the time. Right.
Right.
But and sometimes things end abruptly. You don't get to do relapse prevention. And
Mm-hmm.
especially with my trauma work, like sometimes I could see a family one day and they have every intention of coming back the next week. And then all types of things suddenly are going on. I don't hear from them. And it might be, 3 weeks, it might be 3 years. Suddenly
Sure.
they pop back up and share what happened, what's going on, and what they would like help with now. Right.
Yeah.
Or just connecting. So that's why I say it's like always constantly holding that safety in the light of helping people find that equilibrium again.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they're retaining that and having that body memory, that's an A++. They're going to know that it's a good thing to seek out a creative arts therapist, even if the closure doesn't go according to the textbook.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's the biggest piece with relapse prevention is we're always preparing them, basically, as long as we keep it, consistent. Mm-hmm. And we end each session similar to the last.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were if it was like an ideal scenario and you were able to go through each distinct phase of treatment and you get to the place of termination and you're working on relapse prevention, are there any like additional specific tasks that you might do with clients or you have done with clients?
Scenario, I would measure it by the individual and give them like, say, 1 to 6 weeks for this particular phase. Where 1 week they can create a travel suitcase. The next week we can create a life journey. With that task, I'm watching for, do they include all the phases of their life and beyond?
Right. Can they see past the present moment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
good indicator.
Especially if it's a child,
mm-hmm.
someone early in their life. But yeah, it's an indicator. Exactly. Mm-hmm. You're right there with me where, for everyone listening, we're looking to see, are they really prepared to look forward? Mm-hmm. Are they prepared to look forward? And if not, we're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to that travel suitcase and say, okay, what are the stuff that's really helping you the most in here? We're not just going to say, hey, draw your future.
Right. Well, we've already seen the resistance there. That's not happening. So
right. But again, we need to help them see that they want to envision their future or they want to stay where they are.
Right.
At least come to acceptance with one of those. So, because the people that are really ready to fly, no, they're like, they're the little children that are like, I'm going to become a baker. And they're like all happy putting themselves in their next phase after middle school and after, like they have a little vision It will evolve and change. But in this moment, there's a vision. Or, adults typically have goals. They're like, I want to work on this writing project. I would like to produce something. I would, usually, especially because once you're in the creative arts, or I need to keep working on coping with my life as it is. And this is where I am right now. And I can looking forward later. But right now I'm in my 50s and I know my life is the same for the next so many years. And, and that's a different projection, but you want to be looking to see, are they including it?
Right. I think there's a difference between like, even if it is the same, it's included, right? There's those different phases that are included. Because sometimes it's like, at least the way I interpret it is, okay, that person's not able to visualize something more, right? They're not able to see out into the future, which means they're still living in the trauma. They're still in that moment and they're not able to see outside that moment because it feels so hopeless. And so being able to say like, oh, okay, I thought we were ready to do this, but maybe we're not. So we have more work to do and going back, spending more time there and then coming back to that, see if we can get out into the future again.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's also, the art therapist's eye, we're watching to see the order of how someone approaches the task, right? Whether you're thinking about the travel suitcase or life path, what order are they doing things? Is it organized, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or is it popping up more like trauma? Is it more like, hey, I can think about last year and then I have to go to age 4 and then I'm going to fast forward to right now and then I'm going to, or are they like, oh, I was born, I lived here, I did this, I did that, and I keep moving and I keep moving and I keep flowing all the way forward like a river, right? So that's what we're watching for, plus, and beyond,
Right.
where that's all so much information. And are they reading the page like they culturally would, left or right? That's another huge indicator. What direction is everything facing? Are they looking back? Are they looking forward? Are they open to us? Another beautiful indicator is this motion of your arms up, right?
Starfish.
Things like that. We're looking for that. Are there figures? Right? These are people that are healed.
Yeah. We're open. We're vulnerable.
Right. Like, the figures are like this. Like literally in the artwork, right? It's like that figure. What does that figure need? Let's talk to that figure and find out what they need right now so they can stand tall and feel comfortable, right? Are they comfortable? Maybe they're comfortable. What's bringing them comfort in that position, right? Where as the clinician, how much more there is to dialogue. And you might have to say to someone, hey, we might be at relapse prevention right now, but if we're able to accommodate your schedule and the funding is available, you should stay in the program for another 6 months. 6 months to, 5 to 6 months. Give them a choice, but say, we really should sign on for revisiting more work. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And those clients typically know who they are.
Yes.
They're subconscious.
I think so too.
Certainly does. Right. I mean, these are the ones that want to stay in safety. They've resisted getting thus far in the first place. So but sometimes you do see, that's why I say that, just because I have created the luxury for myself of being able to work with people long-term. I just push for it. Right. So I'm able to put the work in with them so that by the time we get to these tasks, typically I am seeing the freedom, right? I am seeing the release. I am seeing the organization.
It wasn't rushed.
Yeah. But as a warning, if you are seeing more things that are indicating upset and splitting and need of more processing, then keep processing with them as much as you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other things that therapists can do to help kind of ground and orient at like the closure of maybe treatment with a group of people. So if they're doing this type of trauma response or community response, is there anything that they can do to anchor people in the relapse prevention?
Yeah, I think the moment we walk in, we should be preparing people for the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the very beginning, we should be thinking about the end in the sense that, you know, I said it earlier, but every time we're ending with everyone, we're doing that in a healthy, positive way to prepare them for the end anytime, in case that is the last time you see them, especially with people who have experienced trauma
Mm-hmm.
because they've had a negative experience and a major loss.
Mm-hmm.
They've had a major loss and they're already potentially pre-driven in this, you know, the SOS response system. Their neurobiology is sending them in a direction that upsets them. So that's where we need to provide the example.
Mm-hmm.
We need to give them positive endings all the time. And a consistent, you know, the way I do that is the anchor system, 5-point rating. Rate the session. And when I say rate the session, I would say to people, I want you to think about, I want you to indicate the level of satisfaction. Are you getting what you need out of this session? 1 to 5. And if it's 3 or lower, tell me what you want more of. In regard to the art therapy, you know, if you want a new lover, I'm not going to help you with that in the moment.
Yep, that's out of my
but
scope.
I can help you get in touch with how you can magnetize that.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that just like that simple consistency. And with children, it's a goodbye chart or a goodbye song or a goodbye dance. Or, you know, some people, I have goodbye movements where we straight up do this and go, how on Zoom.
It just depends. It's a ritual.
Yeah. Whatever ritual you create with the people. And that's where, like, when I go in and I say, hey, and this is again, trauma-based, but right now we're living in the pandemic. So say you're starting fresh with someone new virtually this week. Mm-hmm. It's like, or you already have established relationships. You can introduce these techniques if you've been working with someone for 5 weeks or 5 years too. Like you can come in with new energy and say, hey, I want to introduce this new technique that I'm learning about. And just say, I want to create a new goodbye ritual with you. Mm-hmm. What would you like it to be? Just like the way when I come in and say, hey, I shouldn't be meeting you because of this horrible tragedy. Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry a massacre happened here. This is devastating. What do you want me to call it when I address it? You know, just like it, or here's another example. If someone is transgender or transsexual, how do you want me to call you? What do you want me to say? Yeah. What are you comfortable with? Right? As another example, these zones of discomfort for the majority of humans. What do you want? How do you like to be described? How do you like that event to be described? You know, whether it's an external experience or someone's personal identification, it's so important as a therapist to be upfront. And it very well might feel awkward in the beginning, but 110% people are so relieved when I just ask those questions. Like, oh my gosh, thank you. Call me Faye. It really relieves the energy that you're naming the pink elephant. Yeah. And then that's why it's the same thing. What ritual feels good for you? I have this 5-star anchor system, or you can do a scribble on the wall. Like another favorite of mine is I do a big mandala, a big circle on a share table. And this is for small groups or large groups, where when everyone comes in, they do a symbol in the center of the circle somewhere to say hello, to just mark that they're here. And then before they leave, if they want to add anything to their one in the center, they can, and they mark outside the circle somewhere to say goodbye. That's another nice one, where we're doing that every visit. So there is a goodbye. There is an appropriate, kind-hearted, peaceful goodbye. And that's what we want to be mirroring all the time, right? So that final day, you say goodbye for now. It's been fantastic working with you. I'm so grateful that we had the opportunity to really say goodbye. Your transitional objects are really great. You know, that's always a really cherished thing, where you take a day and revisit that therapeutic relationship zone. You know, that's why I say, like, you could do 6 weeks, because with each relapse prevention task each week, like best case scenario, you can specifically revisit one of the phases. Right? Like, say you worked on safety for 3 months. Let's do a suitcase all about safety and share all of your favorite things. And like, you can even go back through artwork together, whether you save digital, you know, you can have a slideshow day where you revisit it. I mean, usually people love looking at all their artwork.
The review.
That's one of my favorite days. The day I get all their artwork out and I put it all over the studio before they say goodbye. And people are like, poof. I've also made little books for people.
Oh, wow.
Where I've taken all their artwork and done small, like 4x6 prints of each one. And then, like, this is really great for grown men. Love the book. Grown men love a postcard book. Yes, because what I then have them do is they get this stack of postcards, and then it's like, okay, now while we're together, write down what you remember about that work of art that helped you. And it's really fantastic, because then they have these note cards that are like, oh my God, that helped me when I almost lost my marbles. Right. You know, like guys that are really dealing with anger management, that their significant other was like, yo, you can go see this lady or go find another house. Those fellows, they love the postcard thing because they can like keep it in their glove box in their truck. It's totally personal, and they can check themselves.
Very
so at
cool.
least that's what they report. I mean, they've all identified positively with that. And you know, same with children. I mean, everyone, that's just a unique, I bring up that population because I think that population is often forgotten.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, for all the guys out there listening, there are men that seek art therapy and they love it.
It's so true. I go out and do groups in a couple of different substance abuse treatment programs. And of course, by and large, there's more men in treatment than women, although there are a lot of women in treatment as well. And it's interesting when I have like the women that are super resistant and like anti-art, and this is the stupidest thing ever. This is a waste of my time. This is ridiculous. It's childish. I don't do art. This is not for me. I'm not going to get anything out of this. And then there's the man sitting next to them that's just like totally like whoosh right into their process and what they're doing and making meaning. And so, yeah, it's really for everyone. And we see resistance in both populations, you know, all populations, even with kids. Sometimes they would personally rather do, you know, something play-based than creation-based. But how do we meet everybody where they're at and say like, okay, like I can see that this is a struggle. How can we make it work for you? Even though you may not want to be here right now. And I can appreciate you not wanting to be here right now. But what can we do to meet where you're at? You know, what's your preferred method of expressing yourself? Do you like words? Do you like music? Movement? What is it? How can we connect in that way?
Yeah, it's that's where I like the collage and drawing is a good intro. Usually I find collage helps people that have high resistance and are intimidated by themselves, it seems, to the drawing. Usually a plethora of imagery all over a table is quite enticing. It's hard to resist being like, oh, well, what's that one?
Yes, definitely.
Where it's like materials, right? Like we always take a step back and think materials. You know, we talked about that in an earlier episode about with working with men too, of how sculpture and woodworking and tapping into those layers is really beneficial. And for all walks of life, you know, I don't want to be gender biased. But knowing our materials and measuring that person's resistance. And like you said, just ask those questions. What do you respond to? What do you like? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So very cool. Very cool. Well, should we take a look at some
Yeah.
examples and maybe talk about a little bit about how one of the ways that you're raising awareness about this type of work is by bringing it out and making it visible in the public? Can you speak a little bit about what you've done in that regard, Nicole?
Yes, we'll revisit it briefly. I know we've talked about it in previous sessions, but the outreach, right, and how different it looks right now during the pandemic, right? I'm going to share some imagery that showcases. Let's go ahead and share the screen. I'm going to share some imagery that showcases work in Newtown where we prepared to do an exhibit in the state capitol in Hartford, Connecticut, right? So I'm overjoyed to share a beautiful example and appropriate use of a state capitol, as well as show the potential, right? And how significant it is as creative arts therapists to provide these opportunities for our communities, right? Like right now, we have to remain physically distant. It's absolutely unsafe to gather in large groups like we're seeing right here.
Yeah.
Right? But this is an image of an open art therapy studio where people are able to interact with art therapists. They have information about art therapy, as well as all of these different stations where they're experiencing creating art together. You know, there's a safety nest here where the children then naturally started to create birds, and you can see them in the upper right, all getting into creating these gorgeous, beautiful birds. And over 100 people contributed to this safety nest. You know, and what we can do now is be encouraging that the art making is happening in different homes. And then later we can come together and exhibit it. Later we can come together and bring these artworks out and show them, or we can share them virtually. We can be doing virtual exhibits. So this is another table where, again, lots of choices so that there's something for everyone. If a family shows up with people age 18 months to 80, there's an activity for everyone, right? We have concessions and food. This is just a coloring table where we had the sample that was the announcement, the exhibit announcement went on this drawing later. So all the participants could be coloring them if they wanted. And then those were also, and people could choose if they wanted their work to be on display or if they wanted to keep it.
Nice.
You can see in the background of this one of the signs, and you just see the bottom. It's, color a brick with protective imagery. So we had a safe lighthouse where everything is safe or protective, right? In these outreach situations. And living amidst the pandemic, we can maintain this theme of safety and protection for years to come. We all have a lot of processing to do. This is stressful on all of us, and it's okay to continue to keep ourselves grounded and continue to remind our clients. You know, the children are the first to always tell me, I love focusing on safety and protection. Like they really want to stay there almost all the time. But you can see back here what the sign says very clearly with protective imagery, right? No names, no words. We're really pushing the imagery on these outreaches, because then you get into tagging and it becomes just a whole different thing. In closed sessions, it's different, I think, to encourage that type of association. But in large group settings, and because of confidentiality, we really want to steer away from words and names.
Sure.
Here we are at the state capitol. Okay.
All right.
And this first one is a safe ice cream cone. I could make a lot of jokes about that, but it's a beautiful example of, this was created at an event that was in cooperation with Ben's Lighthouse, an incredible program that provides beautiful opportunities for the children growing up in Newtown, Connecticut. And we did the art therapy booth where children were encouraged to make artwork, either sharing a safe memory from the summer or something safe they were looking forward to doing at school. And all the children participated, right? And then they could choose wherever they wanted to put it on the ice cream cone. You know, and this is another prime example of lots of adults saying, are you really going to say that? Did you really just give that task? And meanwhile, like you described the situation with the man and the woman in the same group, everyone who's into it, they're just diving in. They're like, okay, where's my paper? I got my idea.
Yeah.
The children are drawing. You see, this is filled with imagery, immediately connecting with something because they want that direction. It feels good to the subconscious to say, it's really scary to go back to school. It's a horrible thing. So of course you should say, what's going to be safe about going? What makes you feel safe when you're there?
Oh my gosh, totally, totally. And I think that particular exercise, obviously you did it in response to everything that went on at Newtown, but it's still so applicable right now. Kids are really struggling, and parents are struggling too with their kids at school.
Well, and children are catching COVID.
Yes,
Going to school, and teachers are catching COVID going to school. So there is that reality of, that balance of paranoia, how much of it is healthy and how much of it is too much, and maintaining all the safety measures. And sometimes maybe you should assess your own county and say, maybe we should keep our child home this week. Maybe you can't afford to do that. Like, there's so many layers of the equation that are so complex and very, very stressful. So that's where, again, we're always thinking about, relapse prevention is this tangible sequence that we have in best case scenario. But what we really mean is upset prevention. Trauma prevention is another way of thinking about relapse prevention, where by planting these grounding anchors of safety all the time and saying, what makes you feel safe when you go to school? Or tell me what makes you feel safe when you go to school, or tell me what you can take with you that makes you feel safe when you're apart from me. Where we just say these things to your children before they leave you, before you separate, no matter how old they are. Tell me, what is it, tell me what you need so that you feel really safe until we see each other again. It might be a hug. They might very innocently say, tell me you love me.
Sure.
Most children really shock their parents when you say something like this. And then it's something very simple. I love when you put strawberries in my lunchbox, right? And that's great. But I think it's really healthy to think that way. Relapse prevention as a sense of prevention.
And so if we go over to moving away from the ice cream cone, what are the other examples that we're looking at here? Because they look different, but they have a very structural element. So maybe they're similar. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I'm thinking also about the words, right? Prevention and preparation, right? Like, these also prepare our mind bodies for endurance and resilience, the endurance of this pandemic, right? And our culture. But above, the upper right, so these are two great examples, because the first one is a safe island created by a small group of 3 families that came together.
Very cool.
The lower one is a safe community with multiple safe places, all created during the Safe Places exhibit. So that exhibit that we were during the open art therapy process. So during that studio, the pictures we were just looking at, all of the ones in this lower right corner were built there. There was a corner open just for safe places where families would come in as an individual family and create their own safe place. And then that was installed into this larger community.
That's awesome.
And they're really fabulous. I mean, we use like little electronic battery things, like some of them have lights and little fans that work.
Oh, wow.
And all these egg cartons, my husband salvaged on the streets of New York City.
I was wondering, I'm like, those look like industrial egg cartons.
Get those at the back of the restaurants. There's usually like 2 or 3 you have to toss, but it's worth the 300.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, we had stacks and stacks of them. It was so fun. Everyone loved that material. Recycling, though, they would have just gone to the recycle depot if we hadn't have scavenged them. Yeah, so those are those examples, all again with safety in the front, safety at the front of the focus. Here's a safety bird.
I love that bird.
Safety nest. And these are 2 different art therapists. that came as part of the response team, working with 2 different children. And these are 2 children that came to participate in the exhibit all day versus going to school on the passing of December 14th, the following year. So this created a huge opportunity for, post-traumatic growth.
Right. Right.
Where,
So
yeah,
there was already the closure from the response, and this is okay in honor of and memory of that. That's when you created this event at the Capitol. Am I understanding that correctly?
yes. I mean, basically, so, me always thinking larger for the community. Early on in the sessions, it was a topic overflowing, flooding all the parents of what are we going to do when the anniversary rolls in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I dislike calling it anniversary. I like to say when the date passes, typically, because anniversaries are typically
Celebration. And this
yeah.
isn't a celebration. Mm-hmm.
So I just began to think, well, what opportunity can be created? And I thought capitals are typically safe places.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The state capitol is typically a very safe place.
Yeah.
So I contacted them and said, is it possible to do an art exhibit of the art therapy work that the community is creating together? And they said, yes, complete this form. They absolutely loved it. And then we were able to take it a step farther and connect with the governor. The children got to meet the Supreme Court judges from Connecticut, sit in their chairs on the Supreme Court, and they got to wear their robes. We went into Governor Cuomo's office and met him. Oh, that's so funny. I said Cuomo. I'm in New York now in the middle of the pandemic. Malloy. It was Governor Malloy. And this is his beautiful wife, Kathy, who was so fantastic in this photograph with me right here. Where it was an enriching, academic, mind-expanding experience for all the children and families that came. And we also had opportunity, like in the previous picture, those children were making art. Not only did they get to come help install and see their artwork on display in this gorgeous historic building, as well as make art live. Right? It's like, it was so incredible. And then have all these educational opportunities, meeting all of these prestigious figures that are really making things happen in their world. So across the board, it was just, I mean, that's where we talk about relapse prevention in a different way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Where it's a form of preparation for life, where giving people the choice to elevate and enrich their experience and look in a new direction, right? It's like you come back to the life path idea of those families that chose to look forward and visit the state capitol together and create a new shared experience. Those children were so focused on that all day long. It became like a brand new holiday in the sense of they were just so stimulated. They were looking at all of this magic all day long that everyone reported their kids were chirping like birds halfway home and then fell asleep in the cars.
I bet.
Because we kept it going all through the evening. We had food trucks come. Yeah, we got the music therapist and we all played music and sang on the mic. It was a really incredible experience to be able to provide that for the community. And what a beautiful use of a state capitol.
Yeah.
Right?
And so this image that you're standing in front of with the governor's wife it looks to me like it is a massive, huge bird's nest.
Yes.
Sculpture.
So this is the safety nest that was being created in that original image. Right.
Okay.
Here you
Yes. Really transformed by the end.
Yeah. And you see, I mean, this speaks to the resiliency of the community, right? The attention, the love, the care that went into this nest, the nurturance that went into this nest. I mean, people just weaving and all different ages, all different types of people getting involved. And then how everyone wanted to have their own little individual bird. They were all around. We had trees all around it. Yeah.
So
But,
cool.
and then, so you talk about social connection, where this is a whole nother layer where, you know, typically we do this privately in session.
Sure.
Where we help people think about those connections. Well, this is another layer that has so much potential and is so profound, where you take the art public and allow people to interact with more people that haven't realized what's possible and what's happening. And you watch these little children, like a colleague of mine, we're doing a radio show, Roxygen, where we're sharing these mental fitness techniques for the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. And he met me on this day. And he's a working art therapist now, Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn, Javier Pinnock. And he shared how he was mesmerized, how he walked in and this little 7-year-old boy is talking to him about how his artwork really represents his synapse and his neural growth and the connections that are happening. And you know, Javier shared this story with me just the other day, and I was like, oh, that warmed my heart. I don't even remember these things. And when I read through the notes, I see them. But it was a beautiful story of it. It's a 7-year-old boy.
That's incredible.
Like, and the potential, and Javier said in that moment, he wanted to just melt, and he didn't need that child to know he was an art therapist. He wanted that child to just experience the joy. Like Javier had never heard what that boy was saying before, right? Like he was opening his mind. And that's the opportunity that's possible for these young children and adults of all ages and all types when we take them into the public domain and we're there with them, holding them, creating the safe space for people to come in and interact with them appropriately in what should be a safe public space, a state capitol, our national, our parks, places where we gather and it feels good. Giving clients the opportunity to do that, branch out, extend themselves so they work on that exercise. And it is really a fabulous layer to be there and watch it happen.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, I think when you participate in a larger group in that way, and there is a dedicated space and it is seen by the public, it really reinforces the social connectedness and the supports that are available to us when we're willing to step outside just a little bit. So cool.
Yeah, let's share. I'm going to stop the share for a minute and see. Let's share a few more slides. A few examples, I think, of this is an excellent example of, again, post-traumatic stress growth, right? Where we see the child starting with the dark black color, right? And transforming. Silly and Angry Save the Day is the title of the work, right? Like taking that villainous energy and bringing in the emerald green, this magical emerald green that can then strike everything and transform it.
That's so cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silly and Angry.
Silly and Angry Save the Day. This is another beautiful one that I want to share to represent, and this is the last one I'll share for today.
Okay.
But this is to show, that the sensation of the client that may never be prepared for relapse prevention, but you always have to be prepared that it may be the last time you see each other, right? Where this is the artwork of a child who lost a sibling and survived. And you see, the title frequently was I Don't Know. Yet you see all of these characters, all of these clay figures, where so much play, so much expression, so much processing happened every day in the sanctity of our safe zone, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's an incredible example of how much energy exists in one individual.
For me, like when I look at it, It makes me think about just the state of feeling overwhelmed and confused and like having so much going on all at the same time, not really being able to slow down and focus on one thing.
Yeah. So with that in mind, let's look at this where it's a little less chaotic, right? Like these are two of the figures within all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Collection of modeling clay figures revisited weekly for more than 1 year,
Wow.
right? Secure remembrance, where secure remembrance and transformation were happening hand in hand through play every week
Mm-hmm.
with this child, every week.
Now,
And that's where we stayed, and that's where I stayed. But again, there are layers of preparation for relapse prevention every day, all the time, every week.
mm-hmm.
Right. So I think this one's helpful to share to hit that home that yes, best case scenario, we can visit these tasks and give people, toolkits, treasure chests, travel suitcases, life paths, a life journey game, all these ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can also be doing that the entire time, where as long as we're consistent with that person, right? Like every single child, every family I work with, they do different material. They use different materials.
Sure. Different preferences for different people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When you're using the modeling clay, I'm just thinking about like, one of the tasks obviously is reframing, and we've talked about that. With the little clay figurines that you revisited each week, are you using the type of like modeling clay that you bake in the toaster oven? Or are you using the plasticine that can be reshaped,
Yeah.
remodeled throughout? Yes? Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
like, this is a big Mod Podge of it. But yeah.
All right. All right. I was
For
just
everybody
checking. I
who's
was
watching
thinking
right
about
now, we're
that.
kind of pausing because I'm now holding some. Yeah, where that particular child, like again, best case scenario, I have the kiln clay where, I have other examples where children work in the kiln clay. Let me show you real quick. Hold on. Where children work in the kiln clay and then put it away. Here we go. Whereas that particular child felt most secure by creating these and then keeping a little box where all those figures live in that box. And then every week he comes, opens that box, sets up his playland and dives in.
Gotcha.
Right? Whereas this is an example, kiln play allows the client the opportunity to let go again and again, where, it's nice to have both if you can, because different individual is going to, another child, this is a great example where you see how it's in the background. It's like, it's going to flop right back into that, where they're sharing how they were before the tragedy, what happened during the tragedy, when they finally met their art therapist, and how they were now. Right? So this is a form of relapse prevention in kiln play, where we're assessing to see what do they look at. If I say to them, do 3 or 4 different emotions with the play, what do they share? Where is their beginning, middle, and end? Yeah. So, it's
cool.
totally different. And this is a set of parent-child, where the parent's making the bridge in the lower right, and child's making the bridge on the left. Where again, the bridge is a form of assessing also anytime during treatment that we use it. Where do they place themselves on the bridge? Do they see the other side of the bridge? What are they putting on the other side of the bridge? The bridge is a great one to do. Yeah, the bridge is a great one to do at the end, because you can revisit all those things. How secure is it? What is making it feel secure? Yeah. And how do they see the future of the bridge, right? Like what's across it? So 2 different styles. Yeah, couldn't resist.
So cool. So cool. Well, I was, when I saw the, the colored clay, I was thinking about, all of our conversations up to this point, and thinking about how if you're revisiting those same figures over the course of treatment, how lovely it would be to be using that clay
Hmm.
because of its ability to be constantly reshaped and remolded and transformed, and thinking it in terms of like, have you ever done the El Duende process painting
I don't think so.
exercise?
I don't think so.
A really, really cool process. If you ever have the opportunity to check it out, there's some articles written about it in the Atta Journal a number of years ago. And I've taken like a workshop on it before at one of the conferences. But you start off with a painting and you paint, and then you photograph the image of what you created, and you can photograph different sections. And then the next time you start the process over again and over again and over again. And you just keep layering and photographing your process as you go along. And then so you're constantly in a state of reframing, right? Every
Yeah.
single time. And then you can put together all of those images in like a video. And it's like a stop motion video
Right.
type
Right.
thing or slideshow, and kind of see it develop and transform. But that's what I was thinking in response to your clay, is how they could do that with the clay. And now I'm thinking, okay, I have an idea of who I want to do that with. And
Yeah.
in my case,
No, it was pure magic. That child would always do a plank. We make a plank. So there was an underworld and a real world. And there were portals, like I just kind of created one. There were like portals where they would go through. And just like you said, the child could change what was created every day, little by little, if that's what felt right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a
Um,
post-traumatic play type approach.
Post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where you just, and again, mirroring, holding,
Mm-hmm.
helping them see their world and organize it more and more, play by
So
play.
cool. So
Ah.
cool. I love it. I love it. And
Well,
I
this has
love
been
what you did.
incredibly wonderful. I hope it was fun.
Yeah,
I mean, it was fun to share a visual, right?
I
I hope all
agree. I
the
agree.
viewers enjoyed.
I hope listeners do head over to the YouTube channel, the Creative Psychotherapist YouTube channel, to check out the beautiful images of the community process that you did. It was I'm powerful. Like I almost started to cry when you were talking about it and the work that people were doing in that space and how cool that was. So thank you so much for sharing the work that you do and doing the work that you do, and just being willing to spend so much time with me over the past 7 or 8 months, um, sharing your process. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. And I really hope that it's bringing great ideas to more clinicians out there. And if people
Yeah.
want to see more of what's happening, Emerald Sketch Art on Instagram is a great location. We have a GoFundMe going right now for the Black American Children Movement.
Mm.
Yeah, so join the movement, connect with me. I would love to hear from any or all of you. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll put all the ways that you can connect with Nicole and her work in the show notes. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Raina.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.